Hi everyone, I'm David Aragona, and this is the June 1st edition of Horses to Watch, where we carefully analyze trips from the past week, looking for horses that might have encountered adversity and could be worth betting back when they run back in the future. This week, I'm taking a look back at this past week at Belmont, that Friday to Monday Memorial Day week, and I've got four replays to talk about in total, beginning with a race from last Friday, May 27th. This was the final race on the card that day, race 9, a New York bred maiden claiming $40,000 at 6 furlongs on the turf course. Let's break these runners from the gate. We're going to focus on the number 1, Rent Control, who comes out of the gate well, goes on to the lead, and Rent Control was a long shot in this race, going out for trainer Amira Shashakli. And this horse is coming off a layoff and is being ridden by a rider, Gary Richards, who doesn't get a whole lot of mounts, but is known for being exceptionally aggressive compared to the other riders in the jocks room. And no surprise that he sends this horse to a clear lead early, but is just going to go a little bit overboard, pressing the gas, moving around the far turn here. As you're going to see, Rent Control really starts to open up on the field, and she's laying down some pretty quick fractions in this race. 21-3 for the opening quarter. She's going to go put up a pretty fast half mile as she opens up about 4 lengths on the field, moving around the far turn. Just a really enterprising set of tactics for a big long shot. She's 39-1 in this race, and no surprise given that taxing first half mile. She's going to throw in the towel in the stretch and get beaten by, I believe, 11 lengths in the end, finishing 8th in this race. But I just thought that she ran a sneaky good race first time off the layoff, because she's a horse that I know it made a positive impression from a physical standpoint in her debut, even though she hadn't run well in a much tougher spot last fall at Belmont Park. This was the first time we had seen her in over half a year. And she showed that much improved early speed coming off the layoff, but just got tired at the end. Feels like a performance where she just had to shake the rust off. Probably is going to get a lot out of this race being used so aggressively in the early going. And if she comes back in a similar spot next time out with a rider upgrade to a jockey who's a little bit more adept at winning turf races, I think she's one that you might want to take a look at a big price when she comes back in another maiden claiming race next time out. Let's move on to a race from Sunday at Belmont Park. This is May 29th, race 8, the feature race on this day, the Paradise Creek, going 7 furlongs on the turf course. Again, let's break these runners from the gate, and I'm going to talk about a pretty similar situation to what we just talked about, just with a higher class of horses this time. The number 7, Asymmetric, is the one that I want to focus on in this race, and you're going to see he aggressively pulls his way to the front end in the early going of this race, and a very similar situation to what I talked about with Rent Control, where he just kind of runs off on the front end. This was the first start in the United States for a horse who had done some good running in Europe last year. He had raced in Group 1 races in England and in France, and had given a nice account of himself in those races, going a bit shorter than this. He was making his first start here off a layoff and off a trainer switch to Wesley Ward, who put blinkers on for this race. And you can see with the addition of the blinkers, this horse just gets way too aggressive on the front end, opened up 5 lengths on the field in the early going. That 21-4 opening quarter translates to a Timeform US pace rating of 158 for the opening quarter mile. That is basically as fast as you're ever going to see in a turf sprint. And this horse will pay the price in losing this race for running so fast in the early going. But unlike the horse we just talked about, that the cheaper runner, Rent Control, this horse never throws in the towel. The winner of this race, Big Invasion, does roll past him in the center of the racetrack, but as soon as Big Invasion goes by and those other horses range up outside of Asymmetric, he really digs in and tries to hold on for second in this race, and is going to do so successfully. I thought, all things considered, given how fast he went on the front end, this was a really strong U.S. debut for this horse. Probably doesn't want to go 7 furlongs, especially using such aggressive tactics, but if he can turn back to 5.5 or 6 next time, if Wesley Ward can find that kind of spot for him against Dake's Company, I think he could turn out to be a pretty good turf sprinter for this barn. Let's move on to a couple of races on Monday's Memorial Day card, staying on the turf course, as all 4 of the replays I'm going to talk about on this show are turf races. Let's talk about race 4 from that May 30th card, a New York bred maiden special weight event going 1 1/16 on the turf course. Let's break these runners from the gate. That kind of awkward start, going 1 1/16 on the inner, where they cross over the Widener turf course to link up with the inner. And I want to focus on the number 2, Whistler's Honor. This was a second-time starter for trainer Jorge Abreu. He had made 1 start last year as a 2-year-old, going 6 furlongs at Aqueduct, had run a sneaky good race that day and I actually had highlighted his trip on a previous episode of Horses to Watch going back to last fall because he had a really strong gallop out. He was coming off the layoff and stretching out for the first time in this race, and you can see him kind of in the middle of the pack there, tugging at his rider a little bit. He had gotten basically sandwiched at the start, put towards the back of the pack. That's where I expected him to be anyway, though, because he didn't show much speed in his debut. But as the pace started to back down on the backstretch of this race, you saw him get a little bit keen, ranging up on horse's heels. Jose Ortiz, who's riding him here, does get him to settle nicely enough down on the inside, racing in the pocket. But as they move around the far turn, you're going to see the trouble start to happen there, because while they're not moving that quickly up front, the entire field is pretty bunched up. So it becomes the kind of situation in one of those turf races where trips and racing luck become of utmost importance. And what happens is the horses that are able to avoid any traffic by moving outside are the ones that are most successful. And the two horses that you're going to see come widest into the stretch will actually complete the exacta in this race. Whereas the number 2, Whistler's Honor, who we're going to highlight here right towards the back of the pack, he is just stuck in behind a wall of horses. And coming through the stretch of this race, you're going to notice Jose Ortiz is basically just standing up in the stirrups, not really able to ride this horse out to the wire. He's just going to gallop him into the finish, finishing second to last in this race. But it's worth noting Whistler's Honor is a horse that now twice in a row has not had ideal trips. Like I said, too short in his debut at that big gallop out, and then in this race just really never had a chance to run at any point through the stretch. So a horse that is a lot better than he looks. The barn right now, Jorge Abreu, not going well, but I think if this horse had gotten a clean trip, he would have achieved a better result, and I think he will next time if he gets into a similar spot and is able to work out a decent trip. Let's finish things up with one more race from that Memorial Day Monday card at Belmont, May 30th. This is race 9. It's the Kingston Stakes, going 1 mile and a 16th on the turf course. Let's break these runners from the gate, and I want to focus on the number 2, City Man. Kind of a similar situation to what I just talked about with Whistler's Honor, as we're going to focus on the end portion of this race. That's the trouble for City Man. But at the beginning of this race, I think he actually gets off to a pretty good start, and I like what Joel Rosario is doing in theory here, because the horse broke sharply, and he's able to get him to the front end, which was somewhat unexpected because there's another horse in this race, the number 7, Some Like It Hot Brown, who most would have expected to be on the lead. He's more of a front running type, but breaking from that awkward 1 mile and a 16 start on the inner turf course, the inside post positions are a real advantage. And I like that Joel played the break to send City Man to the front end. However, as they move down the backstretch, you see that horse with the orange silks moving up on the outside. That's Some Like It Hot Brown. His rider was not really content with being off the pace, so he sent him up to the lead, basically intensifying the early pace a little bit. So Joel doesn't really fight that horse. He just tucks into the pocket on City Man in behind Some Like It Hot Brown. And I think from this point, City Man is still getting a pretty good trip, because now he's in his preferred spot, stalking in behind the leader. The problem is this race is going to come apart a little bit. You're going to notice that Some Like It Hot Brown basically empties out by the time they come to the top of the stretch. He's going to fade late, and closers are going to dominate this race. And notice City Man, that number 2 horse, in behind that runner with the orange silks. Joel is going to elect to try to squeeze inside of the tiring Some Like It Hot Brown, but the hole just never fully opens up. And you can see right here, he's not able to really fully set this horse down to set him through that hole. City Man himself seems a little bit hesitant to go through. And you could see Joel kind of like riding a seesaw, sending, then pulling back on the reins, then sending, then pulling back on the reins. It's just, he's not really confident going through the hole, neither rider nor horse. And he ends up finishing second to last in this race, just never really able to accelerate. The City Man now twice in a row has not had ideal circumstances, because the race that he ran coming into this, the Fort Marcy back at the beginning of May, that was run over a boggy turf course that City Man just did not handle at all. And then he ran into this Kingston where he was just never able to unleash his usual stretch kick through the lane, because he was covered up in traffic the entire way, not able to make it through that spot of traffic on the rail. So City Man is in much better form than these last 2 results would indicate, and I think he'll be dangerous if he's able to get back into another one of these New York bred stakes for his next start. So those were all the horses to watch for this week. If you want to follow these horses in the future, just add them to your horse watch on DRF.com. You can get email notifications when these horses run back in the future. Thanks for tuning in this week, and make sure to catch future episodes of Horses to Watch on upcoming Wednesdays.